All right. I'd say let's go ahead and kick things off for today. So first of all, just want to thank everybody for joining us for our open house today featuring SanityRX. Like I said, you all should have received the bar kit, cocktail kit in the mail. So if you haven't already, get that out of the box, get it all ready to go and set up. I'm Keith Barnold with Sanity Solutions. Host today, as well as resident mixologist. So this should be a fun one today, but definitely want to educate you a little bit more on our services wing, SanityRX. So see a ton of familiar faces. I think we've done business in some fashion with just about everybody on this call. So we're going to kind of skip through the intros and stuff. Want to just quickly touch on our mission. For everybody that's worked with us, it's all about creating what our founder calls a legendary customer experience, right? So when you work with Sanity, it's not about, you're not buying a product. We're creating an experience with you. So we get to know you and your company, what's important to your organization. We work with all the different divisions within IT to find out how to design a holistic solution based on all your requirements. Design that solution, then go plug it in, make sure everything works as promised, and then a continual kind of care and feeding of that environment. So like I said, it's not a product. We're not a transactional shop. When you work with Sanity, we create an experience. We like to have fun with our customers and do things like this. Getting really creative in the virtual era here, but yeah, like I said, it's all about just really getting to know our customers, developing lasting relationships, 5, 10, 15-year relationships with a lot of our customers. So like I said, I think we've worked with just about everybody on the call on something, whether we've worked with you on a new all-flash solution for your most critical applications, maybe a high-performance compute cluster for some demanding workloads, maybe just working on overall improving your security posture. So these are probably all pretty familiar project areas that we've worked with you on. But regardless of what we work with you on, there's an underpinning element that contributes really to the success of the projects, and that's SanityRX. I'll let Steve Merkel, our VP of the services team, really elaborate on what SanityRX is all about. But these type of engagements, like I said, are the most critical parts of these projects, whether it's doing a Wi-Fi assessment to know exactly where to put each of the access points, or a performance analysis of what your applications are doing and how to deliver the performance to those, whether it's a migration from one platform to another. These things are those most critical components, and our work really starts. We put a ton of work into designing these solutions, but really, ultimately, the success lies on when we plug these things in and get them to, meet and exceed the expectations of your team. So really, SanityRX is the magic. They're kind of the secret sauce to our success. And, at Sanity, we have this obsession with our customer success. We really feel like we become part of the team. And ultimately, like I said, that SanityRX is coming out, rolling up their sleeves, working on the weekends, putting in whatever time and effort it works, and getting all the right resources involved to make sure that the project is on track, it's on schedule, and like I said, it's meeting and exceeding the requirements of that project. So this kind of obsession with our customer success lends to a pretty relatively high NPS score. And to put it simply, net promoter score is basically how likely you are to recommend working with an organization. So every company, you can look that up online, every company in the world, especially the big brands, all have a net promoter score. Overall, as a company, we rank at about an 85. SanityRX has a separate evaluation we do, and theirs is at a 92. So, 92% of our customers, are very likely to recommend us to their peers and to work with us again. Just as a point of reference, these are some of the big, logos out there and some of their net promoter scores. So it's a humble brag on behalf of SanityRX, and it really is just a testament to, like I said, what makes us and ultimately our customers successful. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Steve Merkel. He's our Vice President of SanityRX. He's going to go into kind of the details of what it means to work with RX, all the different service offerings we have, and how to engage with us. So with that, Steve, all yours.
Appreciate it. While Keith stops his share, I appreciate everybody making it out. As you mentioned, I'm Steve. I'm the VP of Services over here at Sanity, coming to you from the white Sanity COVID void that hopefully we will find ourselves not stuck in for too much longer here. So today we kind of wanted to give you a sense about how we've expanded our portfolio here at Sanity Solutions. Going to get my nifty little stuff going here. Our agenda today, we're going to do a quick overview. I'm going to spend a little bit of time focusing on a couple of areas, specifically services, some MS SQL capabilities that we have here at Sanity, talk a bit about work that we're seeing pretty good acceleration on the Office 365 and the Microsoft stack side of things, and then whatever else anyone wants to dive into when we get into the Q&A. But big thing we're looking for is hopefully you come out of this with a decent old-fashioned recipe cocktail that you like, and a decent understanding of some of the things that we can help accomplish for our customers. One thing that we are giving away as part of this, and I'll be talking about this guy here a little bit in detail. One of our strategic partners, the guy is a literal ninja when it comes to MS SQL, and he's put together a master class, and we're giving away a seat to it. About $500 if you go and buy it. We're going to get somebody that will pull from random for showing up our appreciation for you guys coming to the table and listening to us talk today, a seat in that class. The other thing that we're going to be doing here over the next several months, we're going to have more than one of these sessions. The subsequent sessions are going to be focused in a given discipline. And so we'll be having David on to talk shop specifically around SQL and things of that nature. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit since I'm talking about him. He is one of the principal contributors to VMware's best practice guide around virtualizing MS SQL. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that they've done for customers in that particular domain. As we walk through it. So again, really appreciate everybody taking the time. We are going to take a break here in, I don't know, 8-9 minutes, because clearly we need cocktails in hand. We're going to watch Keith try not to light the building on fire as he smokes his cocktail glass. So we'll take a quick break to make sure everybody is properly hydrated after we get through a couple of our slides here. So just give everybody a little bit of background around Sanity's service practice. We've obviously, everyone knows Sanity's been around for forever. Our service capability, we've had in-house going on about 8 years now. And we primarily we're focused in the early days around servicing products that we sold to customers, doing everything from implementation, doing health checks around that. And we've been focused on broadening out that capability over the last few years. And it's gotten to the point where, unfortunately, a lot of people don't necessarily know about all of the things that we do. And so we'll cover a lot of that robustness today. We are a bunch of nerds over here. 100% of our team is comprised of end users on the engineering side of things. And this goes for our pre-sales folks as well, not just our field team on the services side. But we believe it's really important to make sure that anybody who's executing on our customer's behalf have sat in their chairs at least some point in their career. Make sure that you're thinking really good and hard before doing a thing that you're not going to cause any harm. You don't want people getting phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning on Christmas because a maintenance didn't go well, those kinds of things. And so we've focused quite a bit on ensuring we've got the right mix of talent. And we think that customer DNA is an important aspect to that. Keith mentioned it. Customer satisfaction is 100% of our focus. If I were to stack rank things, I make it the most important thing, even though my boss is on the phone, more important than profitability, because if you're not happy, it makes everyone else's job hard. And so every decision we make, we always ask the question, is this going to ensure a positive outcome for our customers? Are we going to be doing things that fundamentally add value and make their lives easier? And to ensure that we, on the services side, outside of just what we do for Sanity, 100% of our engagements that we did starting in 2020, in January 2020, is we measured how we did. If you've done a closeout call with us previously, there's a little question in the mix where we have how likely are you to recommend us to somebody? And we use that to calculate our NPS. And for 2020, over about 112 engagements in terms of respondents, people who chose to answer that question, we had a 92, which is fantastic in terms of the industry. When we look at some of the big conglomerates on the services side, 11, -3, it's a -100 to 100 scale. And so a 92 we're really, really proud of. And it literally is the mantra of everyone on our team to make sure that we're deriving a level of satisfaction for our end users. We're big believers in transparency. We don't believe in science projects. So we want to make sure you're aware of what our capabilities are when we're going to engage. We stay away from things that we're not good at. If I'm going to bring in some additional air cover or a specialized resource for a particular thing, we'll talk a little bit about our bench here in a couple of slides, but we're transparent about it. So while most companies that provide professional services all have clauses around bringing in contractors and things of that nature, we do too. We're just very transparent about it, and we give our customers the opportunity to make sure that those individuals that we're going to be leveraging are a good fit, both for the project as well, just culturally, how they interact with your team, especially on bigger, more complex projects. We want to make sure all of those pieces that are fundamental to success are aligned, and it's a really important factor of everything that we do. Keith also mentioned that legendary customer experience is the end game, and it drives us every day. Our founder, Jason, he will talk your ear off about that if you can get him out on the golf course coming up. So let's do this. We'll talk about kind of our methodology around how we approach projects in a general sense, kind of what the process is in terms of how you engage, how we go about it. And I think that, Keith, that'd be just to prep you a good breaking point to bust out the alcohol, lube everyone up as we kind of get into the specifics around the services that we provide. But we basically follow this methodology for all of our engagements. Part of it is, clearly we want to go in and discover and understand what the implications are for the project, what your drivers are, what risks that we fundamentally need to manage throughout that. And then we go through a design exercise. Essentially, the way we deliver and interact with you during that process, we start off with something we call a rough order of magnitude document. So it's really goes to articulate what our understanding of your particular problem is, how we would go about approaching solving that problem, what resources are going to be engaged in solving it, timelines, assumptions, things of that nature, cost, so that you understand what the implications are, because we want to make sure we're aligned with that. Part of our methodology and belief is we don't come in and try to low scope things. We want to make sure that there are no surprises. We understand what it is that you need. We charge you for executing just that, not going overboard, not underdoing it, and then coming back later going, hey, we need more money. So it's a key aspect to make sure we're all on the same page as part of that. So we'll go through one or more iterations with you in that back and forth, just to make sure all of those pieces are fully aligned, we're all on the same page, and then that leads in to a scope. Once we move forward, we move into an execution phase. We are able to layer in kind of the Goldilocks from a project management perspective. It's part of our discussions when we're doing discovery, understanding those requirements, understanding what your project management process is. And we can layer in, especially on really big complex projects where we may have multiple skill sets, multiple teams. We may be part of a larger execution that you're doing where you may have 2 or 3 other companies aside from us coming in and servicing part of it. We can layer in more aggressive project management as it becomes necessary. What we do try to avoid, if we're doing an add-on to an HCI cluster and deploying an additional node to something that's already in place and installed, we do not want you to have to fill out 47 pages of spreadsheets in order to get to that next step. And so, again, we try to look at it from a very practical perspective. since we have been in your shoes, what is the right amount of that that governance to ensure success without being overbearing. And then we actually do the work and then come do some follow-up at the end of it. So once we're done, we're not gone. We want to make sure things are working correctly. We remain accessible to you if there are questions. And then oftentimes we have the ability, and we'll come in and do health checks after it. So if it's a new technology that's being deployed, we'd like to make sure that you get some stick time, but we'll come in and typically structure those engagements where we have a knowledge transfer session or Q&A session with engineers that are SMEs in that particular technology, 3 months out, 90 days out, whatever makes sense operationally for you, so that you're not just you start doing something wrong or not to best practice. We don't want that to be something that perpetuates. We want to have an opportunity to help you if it makes sense, if it's something you're not familiar with. So kind of with that, Keith, before we dive into it, why don't we bust out the old fashions? And if anybody here is a bartending connoisseur, please submit your bartending critiques to kbarnholt@sanitysolutions.com. Please CC me so I can make fun of him later, because it does give me a warm spot to give him grief. So with that, Keith, if you'd like to help get everybody a little drunker today.
There we go. All right, that's officially happy hour. So cool. Hopefully you got your kits all set up. The goal is make this super easy for you to make a really impressive cocktail while your significant other or friends, and yeah, make something hopefully you can make over and over again. So we're going to start by mixing our booze and our other mixtures here. So go ahead and take your maker's mark and peel off the wax. It's got just a little tab on it. It's a little tricky, but you just got to get the wax going. Pull off the top here. And you'll want to dump the entirety of one of these bottles here into your mixer, or even just the pint glass is just fine. We're going to take the blueberry agridu, I suppose how you take that, and half an ounce is probably, it's about just over about a quarter of a shot, so just kind of eyeball it. And dump that in with your makers. We'll take bitters. Remember, bitters is very, very strong, so we're going to take just a couple dashes of that with your little dropper and put that in. To James Bond's chagrin, we will not be shaking this. This is a stirring exercise, and actually you want to take your ice, drop that in, give it a good stir. You always see the mixologists doing this. Usually they're shaking something, but they'll stir. I don't know. It's what takes so long to get a cocktail at one of these fancy cocktail bars, but it is always worth it. So give it a good stir. Make sure all the contents are all mixed up. We're doing that. We're going to take the wood chip. Try not to stand directly under a fire alarm, and we're just going to light one little corner of this here just to get some smoke going. Go ahead and blow it out and just put your glass over it. What that's going to do is just catch some of that smoke. Even just the littlest bit of smoke that lines that glass will just add to that kind of smokiness and give it a different dimension. So while that's getting a little smoke inside your glass, give it another little stir here. Make sure everything's mixed up. Take your strainer. Smoke permeate for a bit. Okay. Strain out and actually get some fresh ice here. Pour your cocktail over the ice. Garnish with an orange peel. Salute. Cheers.
Excellent. Try not to judge him for his ice selection. We are at the office. And while I did bring a giant ice cube because I didn't know how to do it right, Keith was limited in his options today. So thanks, Keith. Very much appreciate you going through that. So as we continue on, talk a little bit about kind of our core services. and where we play. Obviously, we still provide a lot of services specifically around the products and technologies that we sell on a daily basis. We don't have to have sold it. We can do it clearly with existing technologies that you may have. You may have purchased it elsewhere, and more than happy to provide subject matter expertise and resources for any of those. And this list is not all inclusive. One thing with services that's difficult to articulate is that you get the question, hey, can you do a thing? The answer is, well, it depends. In a lot of stances. So this is not all inclusive again, but we do implementations around all of these. We typically do health checks around all of these, and in a lot of cases we can get in and do all of the design work, as well as mitigation, upgrades, migrations, things of that nature. And then we'll talk a bit more about some of the other things that we can do. Prior to getting into that, I did want to talk a little bit about our bench and our strategy here. So we do have a core set of resources internally, W-2 employees, again, all former end users. And our focus for that team are really the ones that we focus from a product perspective. So highly certified individuals. We do certify around the specific products for everything that we're doing on the implementation side of things. And you can reach out and poke them directly. All a good group of folks. Many of you have interacted with a lot of them already. Additionally, we do have a broader ecosystem of resources. And this is comprised of kind of a couple of different areas. So we have typical 1099 type relationships. We generally, I've got a particular partner that I leverage mostly for doing a lot of the pre-vetting, things of that nature, maintaining that wide bench of resources that we can pull from on an ad hoc basis. And a lot of times we'll use that for the random requests on a thing that we may not see all that often. Something that may be completely outside of our traditional product portfolio. Or something that is so specialized that you can't service that without having oftentimes global footprints that you're selling to. And so we'll pull from that kind of bench. Additionally, we have some B2Bs that we'll bring into the mix. And these are companies that are generally laser focused on a particular thing. David Klee is one of those cases where he is laser focused on nothing but MS SQL. That's all he does, and he only works on a subset of that particular problem. And we have a few others. We'll showcase some of those in some of these future sessions. One of the sessions that we're going to do in the future will be specifically around Office 365 and Azure. That whole stack, and some of the business problems related to, okay, you've gone ahead and made a move and pulled, gone off-prem, and now your team is starting to leverage some of the new capabilities within that platform. How do you know they're using it efficiently? How are you measuring usage? How are you enabling those end users who may not be technically savvy to get the most of those investments and things of that nature? And that's part of their capability set. Deal structure in terms of how we end up interacting with customers and how we structure the deal itself typically forms one of two ways. Most of them that we engage with are fixed bid, guaranteed result type engagements where it's fully scoped. There is no other conversation if something else is uncovered and not foreseen. Doesn't matter, it's covered as part of that engagement, and we're guaranteeing the result and warranting that for a period of time after the engagement. We do have the ability to also execute on a time and materials basis. There are certainly situations where that makes sense. Sometimes we will see that where we have a more complex environment that might be layered. We're going into an infrastructure that needs significant enhancement. We see this a lot with acquisitions. And so, there's just no way to scope it given it's an unknown state to you. So it's no way for us to to get our arms around it in a reasonable amount of time. And so a lot of times we'll execute those in a time and materials basis, and then break that out into multiple phases, where first phase is the discovery piece. It's a paid engagement, but that has specific deliverables that fundamentally give you value and understanding. So you don't have to go through some unknown quantity of effort. We can chop that up into bite-sized pieces of work that you can execute against with appropriate safety nets, so you can control your spend on an ongoing basis. Again, to us, doesn't necessarily matter. The big thing we want to make sure we do, and our sales team can kind of reaffirm this. If we're doing time and materials, it needs to be, for a finite thing, and we want to have a discussion around that. What we try to avoid is your understanding of how long a thing may take, and our understanding of how long a thing may take may be different. So we want to make sure we understand that. And part of that is scoping. If we're going through and executing something, we're likely assuming we have to have a certain amount of handoff to you, a certain amount of documentation, and you might not be taking some of those things into account when looking at it. And so just ensuring we're all on the same page on the front end of that is a big piece to ensuring customer satisfaction. But we're really flexible and able to make something look the way it needs to look, so it's bite-sized enough or manageable to how you guys do business. Or whatever you need to do to appease those overlords we all fundamentally have in our lives as we work. And so we make sure we're easy to do business with. And then from a services perspective, we want to talk a little bit about kind of the standard fare that we have. And this is kind of the categories that we do day in and day out on a constant basis. A good chunk of this is stuff that we execute with our W-2s, where we're going in and providing services in these areas. Design being a big one. This is something that obviously we do that from a pre-sales point of view. Sanity is a very engineering-rich organization. We have a lot of pre-sales engineers that our team leverages internally. We also have vendor resources that we can pull into the mix. And so we want to make sure we use those when it's appropriate. And so, the services team, the RX team, will get engaged on design work when the level of complexity increases. So there may be domains where it's not part of our normal product portfolio, and we need to bring in particular subject matter expertise to help with the design phase. We can engage on that front. We do have some capabilities from a wireless perspective that we add tremendous value. A lot of times we'll go ahead and do that work. If you're looking for a potential wireless refresh or that type of engagement, where we can come in and do the assessments, we'll just do that. And kind of comp it as a way to help you, get to a decision on your wireless technology decisions there, and make an appropriate decision to move forward with the wireless technology. Part of that is we'll go in and do we can do spectrum analysis where we're looking at actual RF within a building. We'll do simulation of different AP technologies, so we can effectively plan around the construction materials, what the building looks like. And if we do that on-site piece and we gather the RF out of the air and can essentially right-size those deployments for you, with a very detailed report that comes out at the end of it. So you don't have to overbuild, you don't have to underbuild. It does help you get that Goldilocks state with regards to your design. A lot of times we engage on those, on wireless in particular, because something isn't working right. And much to the chagrin of some of our sales folks, a lot of times that's tunable. We've had cases here in Colorado. One of our customers over near Buckley, over there, National Guard base, over there in a corner of their wing was getting RF contamination from what appeared to be Buckley. And so, we're able to go in, make some adjustments because we were able to do that spectrum analysis and the problem went away. We've had other cases where customers going to look to expand their wireless footprint into other buildings, and we were able to save them money because we looked at their existing footprint, noticed that through that process that it was overbuilt, and they were able to leverage some of the APs that they had already deployed in one location and shift those assets over into another. And so that type of thing can be pretty helpful. We want to make sure you're effectively leveraging your capital and saving money where you can. Other areas, security and governance. A lot of times, if you have to build a security program, if you're in that situation where, as a function of some of the things that have been going on in the external market, you see these very high-profile intrusions. You see high-profile security situations crop up with certain software vendors, things of that nature. A lot of times, that will light a fire under executives. To make sure they understand what's going on. We can come in and help design a security program if you haven't had a reason or had the resources to formally develop that. And with privacy laws and legislation, becoming a little bit more pervasive, things kind of stemming off the GDPR efforts that occurred in Europe, CCPA in California, that is something that is going to extend to additional states over time. And you may find yourself in a situation where you need to do that. So coming in and designing a strategy before you start executing on a plan is key, and we have resources that can help and do that. And then we'll also bring in resources when technology adjacent work may be required. Things where migrations might start to exceed some business constraints, or there may be some factors there that need to be considered where you do need some additional specializations in order to account for that in your planning process. And that's where we typically fall in on the design front. Implementation's pretty straightforward. Obviously, this is kind of a day in and day out thing for us, and our team spends a good chunk of their time again on that education front to ensure that we're doing it. Part of what we like to do, especially on, again, big complex environments that are net new, we will build in appropriate validation planning as part of it. So just coming in, turning on the lights and making them blink isn't necessarily enough. We want to make sure things operate in a very predictable, deterministic fashion when non-predictable things happen. So we go through failure mode testing. We go through performance validation testing in a lot of these cases. And then we, of course, want to make sure we transfer knowledge to you. It doesn't do anybody any good if you don't know how to use the thing. And a lot of times you have to get the technology deployed. You don't know what you don't know, in other words. You got to get it deployed. You got to get some stick time. And so we've built our process around ensuring that you can kind of get the most of that. Migration has been a pretty big area for us, especially in 2020. A lot of that was, cloud related for obvious reasons. The whole real estate situation is currently unclear. How much of the workforce is going to return from home? How much of that is going to remain remote? As stuff moves to the cloud, you may need to downsize and refactor your on-prem footprint. As is not atypical, the recurring process of my co-location term ended, or my landlord now is charging me metered power for my data center, so we have unexpected costs, so it makes sense to shop. So we've done several data center migrations. A lot of times it's a handful of racks. We do have capabilities that are large scale and can comply with various additional constraints. For example, if you needed armed escort or additional security resources for transport of data as part of the data center migration, we do have those resources to be able to execute on that. The exchange piece is a huge portion of the migration work that we did in 2020. On-prem exchange is rapidly going the way of the dodo. And being able to pick that up and move it so your end users don't notice is very critical and key. And then, of course, these other aspects, things like technology refreshes, being able to put new technology in place, and again, get on it without having to spend a whole bunch of time of the limited time that you may have with your in-house team. We can offload some of those tactical operations for you. And then health checks and maintenance. So I'll talk a little bit about this more here in a subsequent slide. We got a thing called Sanity as a Service that kind of puts this into more of an OpEx recurring model that's scheduled, but where we basically go in and do those tactical operations that often get pushed to the back burner, especially if the team is resource constrained. If it's not on fire, it doesn't get the same level of attention. And just depending on the state of, what your team may be in and what kind of resources you have to apply, it is not uncommon for us to see those things get pushed off. And sometimes that can get kicked down the road quite a bit. So we wanted to bring something to market, given that it's completely square in the wheelhouse of what we're doing on a day in and day out basis anyway. Where we can instrument these environments and go through and give you kind of these recurrent health checks. We look at best practices. We have the instrumentation that allows us to essentially programmatically determine when something is out of alignment with those practices, so we can find needles, so to speak, a lot easier as a result of the tool sets that we employ. And we generate a very robust document that kind of outlines essentially how we would recommend what remediation you should worry about. So it can become kind of this, more of a quick hit review for you and your team, as opposed to kind of the dread of where am I going to go find the time to crawl through this on a regular basis. We've got it quite tuned and operationalized, so you get a pretty report. These are all samples your account teams can give you. The wireless report's another one. Feel free to ask for one. And we can give you kind of what that sample is, so you get a sense of what all is included. But we give these recommendations, we prioritize them for you. We go through and have a discussion with you about it to make sure our priorities aligned, and you can have a good understanding of what the real world implications are of remediating it or not remediating it. Just try to make it digestible for you. We also go through a resource forecasting exercise. Obviously, a big part of this is looking at what your usage patterns are and trying to help you determine how long you have before you need to worry about adding more resource. And again, a lot of times what we find by looking at those patterns, you see these non-linear kind of upticks in usage. A lot of times that stems from, employee Bob spun something up in the environment. It was temporary, but it consumed a bunch of storage. And the way that we essentially aggregate this data and visualize it makes those things a little easier to essentially get called out. And if we can help you not have to scale and find those kinds of things, it's something that we strive to do, because we think it's in everyone's best interest. And then we'll go do the tactical firmware updates and things of that nature. That's always fun. I think that's everyone's least favorite part of the job, but we can come in on a scheduled basis within your change control process, within your maintenance windows, and apply those updates. Again, we can do this on an ad hoc basis, project basis, for a fairly wide range of technologies. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that Sanity as a Service option, where we're starting it in a more confined way in terms of what we're going to do that for, but that's going to certainly expand over time for us. And then some more exotic kinds of things. And again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but we do have the ability to deploy human capital for however long is necessary. We call these residents, where you may find a situation where a resource departs. All of the institutional knowledge that person had around a critical platform within the business departed with them, and you need somebody to kind of help keep the wheels on while that person gets backfilled, and that backfill comes up to speed within the environment. So we've done these from anywhere from 1+ year type engagements to 2 weeks. To 2 months, to everything in between. And we can do that for a very wide range of technologies. When we do that, you're effectively part of the hiring process of the resource selection. So we do a bunch of vetting on our end. We want to make sure the resource aligns, and we want them representing us. Typically, we are using some 1099s for that, and these are vetted and often recurring resources for us. But we go through and we vet them. We beat them up. We do essentially the technical hiring process to make sure we're comfortable with it. And then we extend that opportunity to you. We let you talk to them if there's something that's not a fit, either personality trait, something that just doesn't feel right. We have others that we'll bring to the table and go till we find that right resource. SQL is another area. I mentioned David multiple times now. We have other resources that we can apply, but he is the strategic SQL ninja that is our go-to. Again, part of his pedigree is, he often works in Fortune 500 environments, oftentimes dealing with virtualization around MS SQL. Doesn't have to be, but it often is an area where you still run into cases where people are squeamish about going down that path. Database is the crown jewel to the business in a lot of cases. And so, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But being able to do things like consolidation are opened up, and you get more flexibility in those cases where virtualization is appropriate. And we can bring him in to effectively give that answer. One of his favorite stories to tell, they did a consolidation effort for a large airline where now they had a lot of database instances, thousands of database instances. So this was a non-trivial environment to deal with. But they reduced the SQL cost from a licensing perspective 8 figures, which is not a small amount. And only one person noticed, and it was something that actually ran faster in their particular case. And so it's a very methodological approach. Methodical is the word I was looking for. End of day, very methodical approach that he takes. It's measure twice, cut once, and a fantastic individual to talk to. A lot of times we bring him in just to have conversations. So if SQL's an area of potential pain, something's not working quite right, you want to understand how you would architect something to make better use of functionality like always on availability groups, and kind of refactor problem databases. We can come in and start off with just a conversation, get on a phone call, start talking through it. In a lot of cases, customers get what they needed out of that discussion. It gives them a direction that they want to go and research on their own. In other cases, they hear something that resonates and find a way to potentially solve a problem that they have not been able to address on their own. So we'd like to bring him into the mix. Data science is another interesting area. We're seeing kind of an increase in customers that have some requirement here. It's not always ML or AI type driven activities. Sometimes it's looking at a data intensive workflow within the business. Sometimes that's because business has been doing it for forever, and they're looking for ways to stay relevant, to make better use of automation, to do things like reduce the level of effort on the back end that's required to maintain that, so they potentially can scale without necessarily adding headcount, and having resource that can come in and look at the data problem in a general sense, and have those discussions, and potentially refactor and architect a better way of doing what it is that you're doing within that workflow. Sometimes it's new technology, sometimes it's a tweak to something you're already doing. But that is something we're starting to see effectively become democratized. So where that was fundamentally a Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 type of problem, we're seeing that move downstream, where customers in the mid-market have the same kinds of challenges. And these kinds of things are now becoming attainable. The skills of being able to potentially run that kind of platform on a long-term basis are a bit more pervasive within the talent pool of resources that people can hire. And so they need a place to start. And so we do have capability. We've got a partner based out of Denver that is exactly that. They're a data team as a service, and we can bring them in to help try to solve some of those problems. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about, this was kind of a big deal with COVID, people not being able to travel. Many companies have some sort of assets that are overseas, and with international travel restrictions and things of that nature, how do I get somebody to go replace a switch then it's on its last leg when I can't put the person I would normally put on an airplane and fly them out? So we have effectively the ability, it's like 139 countries globally, where we can put smart resources on site. And the level of smart can vary, so we can cost optimize that. I don't need a CCIE to necessarily go and swap cables on a switch. At the same time, if it's something a little bit more critical and instrumental, I don't necessarily want to put a first-year networking person that passed their CompTIA test last week, in charge of executing that kind of project. And so, we can right-size the talent pool and get boots on the ground in a lot of different locations. Again, something that we do have customers taking advantage of and are happy to discuss. All right. Kind of last thing here, got 15 minutes left, maybe a couple of things. Security is another area that obviously has been a tremendous concern for folks. Kids homeschooling, college kids not going to school have caused more of the random malicious kinds of inconveniences. But you've also seen kind of an increase in industrial espionage, and in certain cases, if you're in a particular vertical, particular size company, state actors getting in your business, so to speak, or at the very least, with the SolarWinds shenanigans that occurred over the last few months, where you've got state actors going after a thing, and then you're just collateral damage that's caught into it because you've deployed certain sets of technology. In all cases, you have far more board members that know of company names that us in the field or on the ground would much rather that they didn't know, and they're asking the questions, which are all good questions. All right, how do we deal with it? And so we do have a pretty good set of capabilities here to help customers figure that problem out. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about something that we do where we help customers build a security roadmap. Security is one of those things where my brother, who's in the space, has been telling me for years. I mean, it's an arms race to a great extent. You are not going to outspend a state actor in terms of your defenses to keep them out. If they want to get in, they're going to get in. That's true for Google. That's true for Microsoft. That's true, obviously, SolarWinds. It's a problem. They have limitless budgets. And so when you start looking at a practical aspect of security, especially if you're on the front end of this and don't necessarily have a mature program or have dedicated security resources, and you're trying to spin those plates, a good part of the challenge is just, where do you start? What do you need to worry about when? How do you go about taking that information and packaging it up in a way so it's consumable to the people who effectively have the checkbook? How do I convince my CFO, who's ingrained in my manufacturing business, doesn't necessarily care about this, that we need to make investments in certain areas and at what priority so nobody gets surprised? And so we do have a security roadmap exercise. It's kind of a mix of a couple of different things. We usually start off with assessments. A lot of these are industry specific. We can come in and do a gap assessment so you can understand where the holes are, understand where your risk fundamentally lies. A lot of times that's paired with vulnerability or penetration tests. And we take that and we start to work with you. We understand aspects of the business. We understand budgeting considerations and constraints that you have. And we can develop a roadmap that you can use with your executive teams to help them understand, here's the risk. I need to solve all these things. I'm assuming you're not going to give me that much money to do it. Let's kind of break it out into bite-sized chunks and work through it at a reasonable pace. So our team can help you come in and do that. Kind of augment that in other aspects to it. I mentioned the program management piece, but vCISOs. So if you don't have a dedicated strategic security resource, and you're not at a scale yet where that necessarily makes sense, or you're not in a vertical where you're going to have a bunch of challenges because it's highly targeted, you can fractionalize these kinds of resources. So we have the ability to help provide that kind of capability. We can do the tactical efforts as well, gap assessments, vulnerability assessments of remediation, penetration testing, social engineering type assessments. So it's not just necessarily, can I break into your stuff from a network? Kind of pre-COVID, you'd have cases where, can I go rummaging through your trash and see what people leave on sticky notes that got thrown away the night before? So these things can be simplistic, they could be relatively robust and complex. And we've got the resource bench built that allows us to kind of deal with the gamut there. We do have, this is an area where we've opted to have more than one partner that has some overlapping. A lot of times we do expertise. They may have a particular domain that they're focused on that makes them unique. They all have some specialization where they focus. One of our partners, and we had them on the last call event we did a few weeks ago. They've got an academy, a company called Evolve. They have an academy, so they've got a training arm. And then they have essentially these core set of services that are very well managed, very predictable, easy to execute with for all customers, regardless of their project management capability. It's just this really clean experience, and they can come in and do those transactional hits. We have another who is very focused on compliance and governance and program management. And they have essentially the resources to get very customized with regards to that engagement. Maybe you need specific compliance requirement, CMMC, or you have operations in Europe and now GDPR is a significant challenge. Or maybe you're starting from scratch and you got acquired and you got to get up to speed on the regulatory front really quickly. They've got those skill sets, and they can do the transactional pieces as well. And our third partner that we tend to lean on, they have a practice that is device specific. So they specifically harden devices. So IoT engagements. They have an IoT lab. They can bring in IoT devices, pen test them, work with the vendors to help get them patched, or at least provide reports that then allow you to approach the vendor and focus on it. But having kind of that wide gamut there in that space does give us some additional potential value propositions. So obviously things like that pen test and vulnerability assessments, things that help measure where you're at, you don't do that once and forget about it. These are recurring things that you need to execute on. And so having the ability to mix up the resources that are executing that, we believe gives you a better feel for what your risk is. Use the same set of eyes looking at the same thing, they may not see something the same way. And so just by switching that up a little bit, we believe gives you essentially a better handle on some of that diversity. And so again, strongly encourage that you talk to your account team if you haven't already. If this is something that's on your list, we've got very robust capabilities on this front and would love to talk to you about it. All right, so kind of last thing, and we're coming up on 4 o'clock, that we wanted to hit you with is that Sanity as a service concept. Effectively what this is, and we're launching it on hyper-converged environments, so VxRail and Nutanix specifically, where we come in and it's a supplemental management capability. We're gonna come in and do the tactical care and feeding of that environment. We're gonna give you additional instrumentation. We're gonna give you those health checks on a scheduled basis. We're going to give you that resource forecasting, and we give you portal access. So you can kind of see all of this in real time, as well as on those regular scheduled report cuts where we come in and do the analysis. So it's a very kind of standardized service. You get access to a technical account manager on our team. Somebody who understands the technology, who has been in the trenches, who has managed them, who has applied firmware updates, that has done the care and feeding in the real world, who has done deployments, and they essentially are your gateway puppet master to help kind of dealing with these environments, the nuance, the tedious things, so you don't have to. And we do have service descriptions for all of this. So again, happy to give that. That's something that's of interest at all. So you can kind of read through what's included, what's not included. You can also do demos of the portal, show you the telemetry that you get, and would ultimately love to talk to you about that. So that's really it for me. Keith or Kimberly, if we want to open it up, if anybody has questions, happy to answer them at this time.
Yeah, Steve, we've got one that came in the Q&A that said, can SanityRX help with choosing the right cloud or hybrid solution for our organization? Then help with the migration and ongoing management of moving data between cloud offerings?
We absolutely can. It's one of the nice things that if we do it on the services side, again, we don't do this. And just as humans, Jason's a big believer in this, right? We don't want to sell you a thing just because it's a thing. We want to sell you the right thing, but we can take the sale of that kind of completely off the table in terms of the discussion. We can engage from a services perspective. They work for you. They don't work for our account teams, and they can look at it holistically. So we can literally put a hard wall in between those pieces if necessary. And yes, so we tend to focus on the infrastructure side of things. So DevOps, the platform management aspects. We don't focus on the development pieces. So we're not necessarily going to refactor applications that you may already have that need to be refactored, but we can bridge that gap. We can help provide the assessment to that. We can come in and do cost assessments to help you understand what the implications are. And we try to take a very logical approach. We kind of take a high level approach of, and this is a conversation that was obviously very common during 2020. I don't want to have my rack in my office because my office might be going away. What is my cost to lift and shift? And so we can do a really high level, very low level of effort on your part to get a picture of what that looks like. And sometimes that in and of itself is just so far off the mark, it doesn't make sense to dive in deeper. Other times it's like, oh, okay, that's not as bad as I was expecting. So let's get more precise. And so we can kind of start wide. We can do that at no cost, by the way. And then we can get a little bit more specific. And sometimes there's a cost with that. Other times there's not. It kind of depends on the nature of how deep we need to go in that second run. And then we can go really, really deep and looking at ways to try to drive efficiency in the cloud. Transient workloads, what can be shut off, go talk to business owners or component owners, somebody who owns something within the infrastructure that's going to be cloud hosted, and start to figure out an optimization plan before you make the jump into one of those hyperscalers, and work through that. Generally speaking, this is a very broad statement, but I'll go ahead and make it. I'd say the more common aspect is hybrid is usually a piece of it. There are a handful of use cases where it makes total sense to jump to the cloud, but even use cases that 6 months ago were a no-brainer. We're seeing those companies, because they want cost predictability, want to peel some of that back. Some of the economic considerations as a result of the pandemic are driving people to pull some stuff in-house. So hybrid is almost always an aspect of our strategy discussion. And then migration is absolutely part of that. So that's completely in our wheelhouse.
Awesome, great. And we opened up your microphones. If anybody else has any questions, other questions for Steve and team, please feel free to turn on your mic or submit in the Q&A. Otherwise, by all means, follow up with your account team on any additional specifics here. This was very thorough, Steve. Awesome for all the details, and hopefully you learned something today about how to work with Sanity that you didn't know yesterday. So, any other questions? We'll leave it open here for just a minute.
I heard ice. I think that was you, Keith.
Yeah, I was going to say, I made you a cocktail there, Steve. You better. It's a really good old fashioned. I have to say, it's probably the best one I've ever made for myself. So.
You even put my ice cube in it. Look at you.
I noticed that Keith's glass is half empty.
Yeah.
Well, I was evidently talking too much.
Yeah, exactly. Steve has the fancy ice. I'm using the stuff from the grocery store. Well, cool. Well, yeah, unless there's any other questions, we'll wrap up for today's session. We really appreciate everybody joining us. for our open house today with SanityRX. Hopefully you enjoyed your cocktails and had a nice little happy hour with us. And keep an eye out for our next session as we focus on another part of our practice here. So thanks everybody for your time. We really appreciate it. Cheers.